Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of On the Mic with Mike. And my guest today is the beautiful, the tough, the talented Muay Thai fighter, Sindy Maricic. Sindy, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I got to say, as someone who appreciates the art form of Muay Thai and overall combative nature in itself, you are probably one of the most skilled, and I love your work. You have chemistry with your opponents, and you do a great job at what you do with your strikes and grappling. I love what you do.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. I look at it like this for me, and we'll talk about how you got into Muay Thai and everything in a second. But for me, it's the overall discipline and the art form that is Muay Thai and MMA and everything that really encompasses combative nature and combative sports. I mean, just the holds, just the strikes, just the kicks. Each and every maneuver has its purpose, and I think you show your purpose with every story that you tell.
Oh, most definitely. And everything you throw, especially at the elite level, it's very strategic. So it's planned and everything's thrown with intent to have a desired result at the end.
Agreed. And for me, I look at it like this because I'm kind of curious, and this is where we'll start it here. How did you wind up wanting to get into Muay Thai and all that particular art form? Because I got to say, like I mentioned, as someone who respects it, just the discipline that goes into it. But what is it that really attracted you into Muay Thai?
Well, with Muay Thai, I went to a Muay Thai seminar. So it was performed by Ajahn Chai. He was traveling around the world promoting Muay Thai. And I happened to just take part in, never had done Muay Thai before because I was only just started out in kickboxing. I'd been kickboxing for 12 months. I went to his seminar and I just loved it. I loved the fact that I could use my elbows. I loved the fact that I could use knees. I loved the clinch. I just felt like it was just such, it was more of an extension of what I was already doing with just punching and kicking. But what actually got me going and to keep fighting and to keep on going was that Ajahn Chai said to me, I'll never forget these words. He said to me, is one day you're going to be world champ. That's what he said to me. And I hung on to that. So that's what really drove me to become the best that I could be and to win 3 world titles.
I think that's what's great. First and foremost, that's kind of like a premonition, if you will, because he's like, one day you're going to be world champion, then boom, here you are with the gold.
Yes.
I think what's great about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I literally get goosebumps thinking about it because it's like it was only yesterday he said that to me. And he said, one day he stood there in front of me and he's pointing his fingers, one day you're going to be world champ. And I just felt that. And then just from that moment, I just knew that this is the path that I have to go on. And I never planned on being a fighter, but that's just how it ended up being.
You know what it is too? I think what's great about this thing that we call life, and we'll take this on a spiritual route for a second. Like you talk about finding your path and finding your craft. I think each and every one of us in this life has a purpose. Now, mind you, you didn't think of yourself like you'd originally want to be a fighter, but it landed you into some great opportunities and some great accomplishments. So I got to say, in a way, it's kind of sort of your destiny because we've got a lot of great fights with you, which we'll discuss in the show. But hey, man, everybody has a plan for everybody. God has a plan for all of us, and then boom, here you are doing your thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when I first started, it was very foreign for females to fight. There wasn't a lot of us around. In my state, it was actually illegal for us to box or to kickbox. It was banned. We had to come around it by saying that we're doing ring karate. It was hard to get to be treated with respect. We really had to fight our way to get recognized. So to see the women's MMA and Muay Thai and the fighters just really evolved in the last, say, 8 years has been remarkable.
100%. And for me, I look at it like this. So all right. Now, when I was a kid, I'm taking you back here, people. I'm taking it back to 2000. When I was in Rusty
Yep.
Kinney Elementary School in Long Island, right? One of the
Yeah.
things that drew me was like the sports section of the library, right? Because there's so many biographies, so many things to read. And two I specifically remember was there was a biography on Mia Hamm, who was one of the biggest soccer players that came around in the late 90s, and Lisa Sparks,
Yep.
who was in the WNBA, the Los Angeles Sparks, right? Lisa Leslie, excuse
Yep.
me. But like it's just great to see like that particular timeline. Mind you, this is 20 years ago, but just to see like the evolution of people, not just in MMA, but women in general, just the strong, the beauty, and actually giving them the time to apply their craft. It's amazing just to see how over the years the evolution of women's athletes has grown and progressed, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And back when, especially when I was training, I was the only female. I was always just training with men, and I was always the only female. And I'll even go to the Muay Thai camps in Thailand. I was still pretty much, the only female. There might be maybe another couple more, but that was about it. There wasn't a lot of us around. So yeah, it was a little bit harder at the beginning just to get that initial respect, but we got over that hurdle.
I agree. And for me, like, again, you're talking to someone who was raised by two great women and his mother, his grandmother, God rest her soul. So for me, I think it was just, you're going to get there, but you start off with the hurdles of, just like you mentioned, just being the only girl in the class. I mean, we've seen that in wrestling. We've seen that in all sports. But I think that the thing is, too, is as we get older and as we get wiser, we become a bit more open-minded, and then we see just and respect the overall craft that's being done, not just women in general, but the overall sport. And it's just like, hey, let's give it a go and let's make some history with what we got with women's athletes and in general that we see in various sports.
Oh, absolutely. Back in the day before the internet was around, and you'd have we had the International Kickboxer magazine. That would barely feature female fighters, and I would really kick up a stink about how we're not getting featured. And I was told that people aren't interested in it. And I said, no, people are. And then eventually we end up getting a spread in our magazine. But I made sure that we were seen, and I made sure that we were heard, and not just for our fighting on our fight side, but also as an official. I used to judge, I used to referee. They'll let me do the course, but then they wouldn't allow me to become a judge, to actually sit there. So I had to really fight to be able to get a judging job or a timekeeping job. And then when I wanted to referee, they said to me, "Oh no, you can only referee female fights." I said, "Well, why can't I do the guys?" So I had to fight for that as well. So then I became one of the best female referees in our country, refereeing both men's and females bouts on TV. So yeah, I had to really fight my way through all of that.
And first and foremost, I'm going to say this right now. First and foremost, being an official for men's and women's refereeing, that's awesome, just because, again, you get to see the bouts. And this also, in a way, kind of paves the way for you getting into fighting. You get to study from an official standpoint, and then, boom, you get yourself right into there for the physical standpoint. So all in all, it really does create opportunities for you. And I think that's awesome, because being the referee, it's a great job. You're right there in the action. And then you get to see some amazing bouts commence,
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, it was all part of the journey, I think.
I think so, and I got to say, man, I think it all comes full circle with you, Miss Maricic, because I got to say, first and foremost, and we were talking about women on overall and having that voice, so to speak. I look at it from your standpoint and just in general. I think what really appeals me, and this is from the man point of view here, what really appeals me about a woman is just because I'm looking at yourself. You have the great resume, you have the great work ethic, you have the great fitness that goes into your fights, and I think that's what's very appealing and what resonates and generates people, and not just, again, because of your beauty, but just because of the fact that you're an overall athlete that just showcases her skills. I think that appeals and generates with a lot of people. So I got to thank you for that and give you much respect on that front.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that.
You're very welcome. And I think that's what a lot of athletes need to realize, and I think for me, it's one of those things like, yes, it's a job at the end of the day. You're going out there doing the thing, and this applies to anything, but you have to also really take into the fact that, some guy, some gal's going to watch what you're doing, and you're going to have an impact and inspire and encourage a lot of people. And at the end of the day, that's what makes it worth it. And I think you're doing that with a lot of people within your so-called work,
Thank you so much. And you know what? When I was going through that process of being a fighter and developing my skills and developing who I am as a fighter, I was completely oblivious to who was watching, and completely oblivious to the impact that you have on other people. So when people come up to you or they send you messages to say that you're the reason why they started, that's a really nice feeling. It's a really nice feeling, because for me personally, fighting, I'm in tunnel vision. So I'm not seeing left or right. I'm just only seeing just that one goal,
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've seen you with your tunnel vision. My goodness, I got to say, Miss Knee Machine, some of the best strikes, the whole nine. And by the way, I just have to mention, I love the Knee Machine name that you got with your social media. I love the Knee Machine.
Yeah, it was actually given to me. It was after, I think, back in 2005. I fought a girl, and I just completely just annihilated her with my knees, and the promoter nicknamed me the knee machine, and it kind of just stuck throughout all the years, and I was just, when people say to me, "Oh, you're the knee machine," I had this kind of small bout of embarrassment. I'm like, no, I'm more than just my knees. But you know what? I own it. I'm actually, my knees are like one of my strongest strikes, and it's what I really worked on to make sure that when I did knee, that it had such a big impact, and I didn't want them to get up after a knee. So I have to own that name.
You know what it kind of reminds me of? It reminds me of Kevin Hart in his stand-up when, you got your pressure points and you shut down the body. You shut down people's bodies with your knees. But that's just not just overall smart. That's just the mechanics and the technique of it. Because you're like, you know what? I'm going to go in there, wear them out with my knees, and bada bing, bada boom. Let me get the W. Let me get the win. Put it in the, W column, right? But that's smart. And I also, although great nickname and great from a marketing standpoint, that goes a long way.
Yeah, exactly. And even when I train now, still, I actually wear knee pads. So when I'm clinching, I make sure I put my knee pads on, because even my lightest knees hurt my partner. So I don't want to injure anybody when I'm training.
Oh, absolutely. But I also look at it from a standpoint, and this is actually where I have to ask you about the coaching as well, because as someone who has applied her craft inside, the ring, the squared circle, what have you, getting in there to fight and apply your craft and hone it, how does it feel from the other standpoint? Like, you're coaching, you're training a lot of great people, because again, we talked about the inspiring, encouraging part, but god dang, with someone with your intellect, your knowledge, and how to apply your craft in there, you have a lot to offer from the coaching standpoint, and that's got to make you feel good.
Oh, absolutely. And so when I stand out in front of class, or I'm just filling in for somebody, and when you have that little bit of, say, a little bit of extra knowledge or the experience from fighting or just training with various people, when you show them something so small that completely changes their technique from going from good to being great, and to watch people light up, it's like a mind-blown moment. Like, that's everything as a teacher and a coach. So I love that. So when you kind of when you can give that to people, I get so much joy out of it.
And I bet, and I think what's great at the end of the day too is from teaching or coaching, what have you, you have that spark, and I think with you, as I can tell just from your overall personality, and this is why I love you, you have that vibrancy and you have that passion that really will, again, we talked about resonate and generate, that really goes with students and trainees that really want to apply their craft, and I think with your guidance, it does help with a lot of them going forward.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very passionate about Muay Thai. I'm very passionate about the art of Muay Thai. I'm very passionate about, if somebody wants to learn the art of Muay Thai, I'm very passionate about them being the best martial artists. They don't have to fight, but being the best martial artists in Muay Thai, and especially when it comes to technique. The technique is so beautiful, and when it's done right, it's effortless. And you don't have to have so much strength. You don't have to have so much brute force, and you can just enjoy just flowing with the art of it, and that's what's so beautiful about it. And that's why I'm so big on technique, because that's the hardest, even though we've developed so far in terms of sports science, and people are producing athletes at a quicker rate in terms of physically, but in terms of, when it comes to the art, the process hasn't changed. You still have to go through the hard yards. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I'll be honest with you. As soon
Yeah.
as you said hi-ya, I was channeling my inner Mr. Miyagi right there, man. I felt like I was in
Yeah.
the Karate Kid. But no, I also look at it from a standpoint as, if I can make a pop culture reference, go into that for a second. You're kind of like the next Karate Kid, and people, where am I going with this? Yes, I'm going with this here. You're like Hilary Swank, where Mr. Miyagi's teacher Hilary Swank, focus.
Oh,
Focus, Julie's son. That's what you're kind of like with how you go at it.
do you know what's really funny about what you just said? When that movie came out, Million Dollar Baby.
Yes.
Yes. So people at that time, people believed that I had such a like a resemblance to Hilary Swank. So that's the other thing. That's the other name that kind of stuck a little bit. People started calling me the Million Dollar Baby, and I actually have a story. I flew into Bangkok Airport, and they thought Hilary Swank got off the plane. So I was bombarded. at Bangkok airport, and I had to tell them that I wasn't Hilary Swank. But that year, wherever I went to Thailand, whichever camp that I went to, they thought Hilary Swank was training, and they started taking photos and putting my picture on their website, saying that Hilary Swank was at their camp.
Well, first and foremost, that's a great comparison, though, being compared to Hilary Swank.
But even locally back home, I'd go to a fight night, and then someone would come up and go, "Can I have a photo with you? Because you look like Hilary Swank." I'm like, "Okay."
Well, that is funny though. But no, what's interesting about that is too, that movie also encompassed a lot about female fighting and stuff. So I mean, at this particular time period, so it really does. It kind of equates in a way, you know.
It does, and it was a great movie too.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, because I'm thinking back to it. It's like before we had, when she was in The Next Karate Kid doing this stuff with Mr. Miyagi, and then we go fast forward years later, The $1 Million Baby. I still can't believe that goddamn Hilary Swank from '93 to when that movie came out, man. That's some growth with her movies, from comedies and what have you, to what we saw with that. My goodness, and she's just an amazing actress. So, like I said, great comparison. If you weigh to you, Miss $1 Million Baby over there, I like that. That's still funny though. I like that.
Yeah, I'll just own it, you know.
Well, you have to, and I also look at it from the standpoint. And my goodness, let me keep my composure. But I also look at it from the standpoint as there's a lot of great female fighters out there that really encompass it. Like you look at boxing, right? You look at people like Layla Ali. When you look at mixed martial arts and UFC, like for instance, we have Ronda Rousey's, we've had your Shayna Baszlers, we have your Jessamine Dukes, your Miesha Tates, what have you. One in particular, we got Valentina Shevchenko. You know what I'm saying? Valentina is killing it in UFC, and I believe you've also done some training with her, right?
Yes, I had back in 2009 at the WMC camp in Thailand. Yeah.
I have to ask you about that because, I mean, and I don't mean to cut you off, but god dang, man, look at what Valentina's doing now in the UFC and just her overall craftsmanship at what she does. She's another one that's just taking the MMA world by storm.
I knew as soon as she got into the UFC that she was going to kill it, straight away. That was without any question of a doubt. When I was 32 at the time, she would have been in her early 20s. So I think 21. And I remember sparring her, and I just thought to myself, holy hell, this girl is just fierce, like very fierce. And she's going places. And I don't know how many times she won the world championships in Thailand, but I competed 5 times. I think she won every time I was there. Like she's 17 times world Muay Thai champion. Mm-hmm. She's very, very, very intense to train with. She doesn't take her eye off you, and her hands and her timing is just phenomenal with Valentina. I didn't get a chance to train with her sister. Her sister was there as well, but every time we had to train, the trainers would partner me up with Valentina. And as much as I loved training with her, Jesus, she gave me a run for my money.
Well, I think that's what's the best with her, and I also look at her from her bouts that we've seen from UFC with girls like Jessica Ai and Liz Carmucci. It's one of the things where, like, as a fan of the art form and watching this girl, like, mind you, you're training with her and you're seeing what the absolute beast that she is. For us here in the States, it's like, god dang, man, we have another one in the UFC division for the ladies, and it's like, holy hell, this is another one that is a force to be reckoned with. And each and every time that we see her, and it's encompassed in her entrance, and when she gets in there, that stare and everything that she does, it's just the total package. And she is just one of the ones that is, again, just to reiterate, taking it by storm.
Oh, she's absolutely phenomenal. And you're right, she is the total package. She lives and breathes martial arts. They've had a great opportunity to be able to do something like that full time as well, and travel the world and really develop and train with. And it's been able to train with different people to develop your skills, because everybody's got something to offer. And you keep what you like and leave what you don't like. It just depends on the type of fighter that you want to become.
Of course, and I think with the flyweight division and what we've seen in UFC and promotions like Invicta, Shannon Knapp's all women's mixed martial arts promotion, it's one of those things where, for me, I also love it because for me, with combative nature and everything, like, I think what's very important, like we touched upon training and coaching, like what you do and your passion for it. Like here in the States, like I love the fact that we're seeing more MMA gyms, more boxing gyms, more trainings for wrestling, and so many different art forms that everything is right at our fingertips. And it's just we're under the learning tree and the tutelage that goes into it. I just love seeing the expansion in the States of just so many schools going out there because that really helps going forward.
Oh, absolutely. You know, back in the day, you had a foundation in something, whether it's karate, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing, kickboxing, but now you can just walk straight into an MMA school and learn MMA, whereas, so we have such a greater pool of fighters coming out because they're not spending 10 years learning one art and then just kind of picking up little bits and pieces of another martial art and mixing it together. They're just walking straight in, doing 12 months to 2 years of just MMA training. That's what I'm seeing now as well. They're just offering, beginner MMA classes. So they're throwing in a bit of striking, a bit of ground, and a bit of wrestling.
Agreed. And I think what's very key about it with all fighters and people like yourself, which I enjoy, it's like you go from MMA, you go to Muay Thai. What's great about it is, too, and we'll talk about Thailand in a second, but god dang, when you infiltrate and put more moves into your system, into your arsenal, that just opens up a variety for you. And I love the fact that everybody just doesn't stick to one art form and they learn more to incorporate with strikes and kicking. And I think that really goes with it. Like you were talking about, it was just one art form. Now let's just expand. Let's get to more. Let's learn the history. Let's learn the science. Let's go out there and just, apply our craft with so many things that we could do, because there's so many ways to, when you're in that spotlight, to damage an opponent, to weaken them, and it makes for the overall result.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm seeing more and more of that now too. They're going straight into that MMA, and skipping that little bit of that process.
Agreed. And it's one of the things where I look at it from a stance like, all right, this is my nerdiness coming out. So looking at the history of wrestling, like late 1800s, early 1900s, you have catch wrestling, which is infiltrated by, you see guys like Luthez and George Hackenschmidt, early days of professional wrestling. And the thing with Muay Thai, and you get to learn about the histories of MMA and just how everything comes into fruition from the disciplinary standpoint. I think history is so important, and the same goes with boxing. Like, history goes a long way. This might go from a nerdy standpoint, but I think a lot of people have kind of feel like it's lost. And the reason why I say that is because some people just want to get into it right away. You know what I'm saying? Oh, I want to do this, want to do that. And they kind of rush a little bit, but it's like, yo, take your time, show some discipline, show your knowledge, do your studying, and it all comes out in the end. But I think studying in the history and knowing the science down to a T really helps going forward.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more on that.
And the thing is, too, and like you were talking about, like back in the day, we didn't have YouTube and all this stuff. I mean, with the days of social media now, it's so, again, everything's at our fingertips. Mind you, there's some pros and cons to social media, but I think nowadays, with just like, we used to just have to, like, my goodness, well, we would look it up with this and look it up with that. We would have so many other ways to learn about things besides the internet and read books and whatnot. But you have everything from the social media standpoint. It's like, hey, let me type this here. Boom, here we go. Let me go to this destination, that destination. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have Instagram. We have so many ways of reaching out to, how to want to apply our craft, go to school, go to the gym. Everything is at our disposal and at our fingertips nowadays.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, there are pros and cons of that. Back in the day when I wanted to learn something new, I didn't have that at my fingertips. I actually had to go and train and do the hard yards. I had to go back to my room, write things down so I didn't forget. Take photographs of me doing a particular, especially with I've actually got photos where I've taken of me learning how to knee, because we didn't have iPhones. We just, we can just film it. So the process was quite slow, but I just learned so much of really just slowing it down and understanding like every component of it. With having everything at our fingertips, the problem that I do see in gyms now is that they see something and they want to be able to do that, but yet you need to learn how to walk before you can run.
I'm going to use the phrase here. It's like they just want to go out there and ruin someone's world. You know what I'm saying? Ruin a man's world, ruin a woman's world. But it's like, whoa, like you said, they need to learn how to walk before they can run. It's also, all right, and kids nowadays, and I'm not going to put it like this, like, back in my day, but look at the youngins nowadays coming up. They don't have the knowledge of like when we used to, like you were talking about like pictures and stuff, like the days of when you used to have like a blank tape and you would tape something before we even had to do that. You'd have to tape stuff. You know what I'm saying? This is what we did. And also just watching old school films. And it's not like, okay, we're going to watch it on YouTube now. You see what I'm saying? Because we used to have like, we used to do tape trading. You tape trading, you watch videos, you watch like how everything is done, documentaries. Now everything is okay. Let me click on YouTube, if that makes sense from a, social media standpoint.
Absolutely. And then, you'd have to practice that, and you have to practice it so much. I'd get asked all the time, how do I get as good as you, or you make it look so easy. And I've done these like over 1,000,000 times. I've thrown 1,000,000 kicks, 1,000,000 knees, 1,000,000 strikes. It's not a matter of just throwing 50 kicks or doing it for 6 weeks or a few months. It takes a minimum of 2 years just to learn how to kick. 2 years, a minimum of 2 years. So that's a lot of kicking in 2 years.
I don't mean to laugh, but as soon as you say kicking in 2 years, I'm just doing like picturing you doing these drills. I'm just kicking and kicking and kicking for 2 years. Because you're right, it's the way you kick and the way how you are very versatile and volatile with the kicks, but just the overall craftsmanship of how I place the kick on a body part. And like you mentioned with your kickboxing background, there's a lot that goes into it from the ground game.
Oh, absolutely. And then when you compete, that adds another layer to you as a martial artist, because you learn what works in combat and what doesn't work in combat and what you need to change.
Agreed.
So, yeah. So, and that's what I love about martial arts in general. And when you speak to other fighters, I always listen, because there's always something to learn. They've experienced, and I want to know what it is, because if that can make me a better fighter, then I love that. So I never stop learning.
You don't, and I think for me, from looking at your work with IFMA, WMC, like there's so many promotions that you've done with your Muay Thai World Championships, and I gotta say, for you, I've seen a lot of your fights. I really have. I've done my research. I've done my studying on you. Each and every fight I see you going, like you were talking about that stare that you got. I love your intensity, which led to said World Championships. Each and every fight has a story, and it showcases that each and every one of your bouts.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I took my fighting. It was very serious, and very intense. And same with my training. And anybody that knew that trained with me, that's all I thought about. And so you basically, they either had to step up or step out. And I went through a fair few training partners too, because if they're not on the same page, then we can't move forward as a team.
Agreed. And I also look at it from a stance like when I watch you again, like you do it so fluidly. And I got to mention that you have the fluidity of it as well. That's another word I'll use. But it's one of those things where I got to say, when it comes to you, and this is why I love your badassery, like you're kind of, and I'm going to use this precedent here, you're kind of like a legend when it comes to Muay Thai. And I use that with the utmost sincere respect because you're a legend. And again, we talk about paving the way, but there's a legendary status that you have. You're up to that status. You are at the top, if you will. There's kind of a pedestal with you. So I got to say, there's a lot of glory that comes with what you've done in that particular world.
Thank you so much. And you talk about the fluidity of my movement.
Yes.
I owe that to my coach, because right from the get-go, that's something that he trained me with. He said that you need to flow. And I was constantly about flowing and being able to adapt. So he made me I was never that one-dimensional fighter. Okay, just go forward, just smash and bash. I could do that. I can blitz. I can throw a lot of combos. I can counter fight. I can be offensive, defensive. So I owe that to him, because he really focused on being fluid. Because you need to flow, because when you flow, especially at a higher level, because what they're going to look for is being able to break your rhythm. And that's what you need to do. You need to be able to break people's rhythm. And yes, you need to flow. So we focus a lot on flowing. So I owe that to my coach.
And beautifully said. And I also look at it from a stance of, what's interesting about this day and age with technology? Like we've seen so many, this is where I compare video games to it. And I know people, you're thinking, what does this mean? All right, here we go. So look at video games, right? Like we've seen so many UFC video games, we've seen professional wrestling video games, right? The fluidity also comes in where I look at it like, okay, when you're telling the story with your match, and this also comes with training as well. When I look at professional wrestling, everybody wants to do the high octane aerial assault. They want to do the moves over the top. They want to jump, what have you, which is great. It's a different style. But it's like, let's not forget the mechanics of working over a body part, systematic dissection, joint manipulation. Let's not wrestle or have this match or tell this story like we're playing a video game. You know what I'm saying? Because that's a lot of how people get influenced. And there's a lot of different ways people get into it. Sometimes by playing a video game, you see that visual, that imagery, and it's like, hey, I want to take this virtual reality and turn it into real life. But there's some things where you also have to learn, let's not treat it like it's a video game, and let's actually treat it out there like, I'm going out there, I'm going to tell a story, I'm going to work over a body part, and we're going to tear the house down. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And that's an art form. And for me, when I watch a fight, it's not so much about, oh, that person knocked that person out or that person won. I look at it from the art, where I go, that was just so beautifully executed. And I really appreciate the art form of any martial art. Like, I went to a BJJ seminar, and, I don't have a lot of experience in BJJ, but the guy that was teaching, the way he flowed, I was just in awe. Absolute awe. And just by watching his movement, the level of experience that he has. His movement was like poetry, emotion.
I was about to finish you on that because she said poetry. I'm like, in motion. But no, that's very true, and it's very valuable what you're saying, because it's just like, people, when we look at a certain match, if you will, let's define it as the match, right? So people are like, okay, there's got to be a winner, there's got to be a loser. But I'm like, and at the end of the day, they both win because, again, they've accomplished their goal of telling the story in the art form. I've always used that. I don't know if you remember this. So there was a show back in the day called The Joy of Painting, right? Bob Ross, a tremendous artist, right? 30-minute show, starts off a little speck, and then at the end of the 30 minutes, you got a waterfall, you got a masterpiece. And if people can take how they are passionate about Bob Ross was with his painting, it's almost like when you talk to somebody about art, is it like, are you really looking at the photo? Are you looking at the photo? Or are you really looking at the photo? Don't glance at it. Actually look at it,
Oh, absolutely. And when you go to Thailand, when you train there, and you're doing their art beautifully, they absolutely love it. They love it. And they're all about the beauty of you, performing their art. And back in the day, especially when I was judging quite early on, I haven't officiated for quite some time, but if it was a close match and it could go to a draw, back in my day, you weren't allowed to have a draw. The person can win purely based on how they executed the Muay Thai moves and the art of it and how beautiful they looked. And if the other person was a bit more sloppy, they could lose their fight on that.
You know what it's kind of like in listening to you talk about how the judging and stuff? It's kind of like, all right, with amateur wrestling, right? Like when people look at amateur wrestling, it goes by points and pins and how many points you have in said bout. So it's a little similar on that aspect, but it's just like, well, that's also what goes into it, the judging and just how they appreciate the beautiful arts of it, because it is at the end of the day. And I also look at it from your standpoint, because you did mention Thailand. And I want to ask you this, Sindy. Talk about training in Thailand, man. My goodness, Thailand, an amazing country, amazing at what they do. It's a beautiful atmosphere. Talk about training there and picking up some maneuvers over there.
Do you want to know about my first trip to Thailand or my 15, 20 trips after that one?
All right, let me be specific on this. Talk about the Thailand experience overall, because I know you've been there a lot. But god dang, woman, you're killing it over there in Thailand. We have to talk about this. So yes, talk about the Thailand experience. Let me rephrase.
I'll tell you. Well, what got me to Thailand was in the first place, I actually had my first Thai boxing fight, and I flew over to Western. So I'm on the eastern side of Australia. I flew over to the western side of Australia. So there was a bit of a time zone difference. And I hadn't really done a lot of Muay Thai, just a little bit, maybe I call it a kickboxer with knees. And I was winning my fight. And then in the second round, I copped the knee. I copped the knee. I came off because in kickboxing you can bounce off the ropes a bit, yeah. So as I've come off the ropes, I went straight into a knee, and I fell to the ground and I couldn't get up. It took me at least 20 seconds, and it was my only time that I had been knocked down and stopped in a fight. And I was so disappointed. I just said to my coach, I said, I'm going to Thailand. I'm going to Thailand. I literally just packed my bags and I flew to Thailand, and I turned up on Ajahn Chai's doorstep. So he was the one that I spoke about before who introduced me to Muay Thai. And I said to him, I said, I need to learn how to do Muay Thai. Like, I need more of it. And he said to me, he goes, do you want real Muay Thai? Or he goes, you want pretend Muay Thai? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, oh, well, I can send you to Fairtex, which is like a lot of the commercial gyms, or I can send you to real Muay Thai. I said, I want real Muay Thai. So the following morning, he goes, okay, so come back in the morning and I'll send you to a real Muay Thai camp. So my coach and myself, and there's also one of my other training partners, he came along as well. There was a van waiting for us. We had no idea where we were going, absolutely none. So this van drove us 5 hours southeast of Bangkok in a place which I can't pronounce it properly, but it's called Willam. It's like Burirm. Yep. And that's where a lot of the great fighters come from, like Borkow, for example. I'm not sure if you've heard of Borkow. He's one of the legends in our sport. And this place that we were at, there was no white people at all. And we were given these huts to stay in, and the beds were like concrete. It was a black and white TV and a cold shower.
Damn.
And there was no shops in sight. So there's one little, kind of like a little shack on the side of the road. That's all that was there. So I couldn't go to a shopping center or anything like that. And in the following morning, we got picked up by a Thai trainer. There was about 5 or 6 Thais in the back of the ute. We jumped in the back of the ute, and he just told us to get out of the ute and start running up the hill. So we ran up this massive hill, did some shadow boxing. He drove us back to the camp, and he made us watch the Thais train. And watching them train and the way they throw I'm talking 100 kicks like it's nothing, gave me a lot of anxiety. And my Thai trainer couldn't speak English. So he had no English. His wife had broken English, some little bit of English. So I got to communicate a bit through her. And she told us that he's going to come back at 3:00 in the afternoon to pick us up to go train. So 3:00 came. I think I downed about 2 Red Bulls from the anxiety of watching them train. And the same thing, he got in the back of the ute. So it was all the unknown. I had no idea what was ahead of me. You know, he threw us in the back of the ute, told us to get out and start running. And then he was behind us. So when he wanted us to sprint, he would speed up and we had to run faster. And I didn't know how far we were running. So it could have been 1 kilometre, 2 kilometres, 5, but it was actually 10 Ks to the camp. So this was 3:00 in the afternoon in Thai heat. So it's still quite hot at 3:00 in the afternoon. And when we turned up to camp, I don't think I was just that exhausted. Like from the training, I've got photos which I actually should put up on social media. I couldn't even crack a smile, you know, out of that exhaustion. And I said to my Thai trainer, even though we couldn't speak English, but we communicated through Muay Thai. Mm-hmm. And to me, Muay Thai it's a universal language. You don't need to have the same dialect, but we're speaking the same language when it comes to training the art, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I said to him, I want you to teach me how to knee and clinch. Don't worry about kicks, knee and clinch. And he basically taught me how to knee, and he said to me that he's going to teach me everything that he knows. So he wants to give me a really good foundation. And during that time, I was there for a month in Thailand for my first trip. It was an eye opener. My body was that sore, so when I'll go back to my room and the bed was like concrete, I couldn't even roll over. I was in so much pain, and there was no mats on the ground, so we're training on concrete. My feet were cut up from kicking. The bag was like concrete, and my knees. Eventually, I was kneeing the bag that much that I had broken the skin. I've still got scars on my knees where my knees were bleeding, and I kept kneeing through my knees being so split and open. And we're doing sit-ups. We're doing sit-ups on concrete. And I remember one of the days I said to him, I said, look, I can't do any more sit-ups on the concrete. I think because my backside was so blistered. So he went and got a scarf and put it down on the concrete. I was thinking to myself, I need a mattress, not a scarf. So then at some point he said to me, he goes, you're going to fight. I go, what do you mean? He goes, you're going to fight. I've organised a fight. So I'm like, okay. And then on that night, we got into the same thing into the back of the ute, and there's about 20 people in this ute. Like 20 people. We drove to we're going to Surin. So it's about, I think now an hour further. But we ended up at the Cambodian border. So once we got there was these guys just standing there with machine guns. I'm going, oh my God, what the hell's going on? But once we arrived to the venue, it was basically a ring out in the middle of nowhere. And the canvas wasn't even straight. It was really bumpy. And I ended up fighting this girl, this Thai girl, and I knocked her out in the third round, but I didn't realize at the time that I actually won the title for the province, which is quite nice. So that was my first experience. But yeah, well, after 3 days, there's a lot of tears in my room. I thought, oh my God, what have I got myself into? But I was grateful for the experience and to be shown the true, authentic way of training, of the way they train, as opposed to things being a little bit more comfortable and watered down, so to speak.
I will say this, first and foremost, beautifully and eloquently said, and this is where I also have to follow up there, because I just want to mention this, and this is where I got to just tease you a little bit. God dang, man, when I said talk about Thailand, and then you're like, well, what trip? That was some swag, man, because you're like, yeah, I've been to Thailand, I've done there was a little swag on 100 there for you, Miss Sindy Maricic. I like your confidence. I just had to put that over just to tease you just a little bit, because god dang, that was funny. But I digress. I look at it from a stance of we've had a lot of great Australian fighters, from yourself, Yolanda Schmidt, and Ty Emery, who have spoken to, and we've touched upon her transition from the Lingerie Football League to where she's doing now in Phuket, Thailand. And listening to you tell the story is very similar to listening to her, because it's one of the things is you have your surroundings, you're communicating in many different languages, and what's great to it is you get to take what you learn there and incorporate it to when you get back into your other fights. And when you talk about the travel, it kind of equates to like when wrestlers go to Japan, right? Because when you have wrestling here in the States and you have wrestling in different countries such as Japan and the United Kingdom, right? Like it's different in the disciplines, but you're also sore and there's different trainings to it. And I think what's great about it is that from what a lot of people can take from listening to your story, god dang, man, that is something that's toughness, and that's something that's pure and utter, dare I say, grit. And it's something that a lot of people can learn from going to different places. And I like how you just said, hey, you know what? I'm going to pack my bags. I'm going to go to Thailand, because that's commitment right there. And it shows with your overall experience that you've had there.
Oh, absolutely. And when I was training there, because I had this preconceived idea that Thais were, they run 15 kilometers a day, they train 6 hours a day, and they're really hard people. So I thought, well, that's what I have to be. So I can't. I learned from that I had to have a poker face. So, and that's how I got my name to the machine, because even my training partners would say to me, from Monday to Friday, your energy, your intensity does not train, and I don't show that I'm tired. It doesn't show on my face. I said, but I trained that from my first experience in Thailand, because I thought, well, that's what they do. That's what I have to do. So, and me training through with my knees busted up, and they ended up getting infected. They ended up taking me to the hospital because they were so bad. And then I found out through my Thai trainer's wife that that all the Thai boys at the camp thought I was crazy because I was kneeing the bag with blood pouring down my legs. But I just thought that that's what you had to do.
Well,
So
it's also the thing that I look from you talking about and going to the hospital. It's one of those things where it's like, as they say, it's not ballet. But what I can also see from that too, and as I think from learning from, like we talked about experiences throughout this show, it's one of those things where like sometimes you're gonna get hurt. You may have to go to the hospital. You may have to get stitched up. You may get banged up. But I could say, and I could think from hearing you tell your story and tell your overall accomplishments and the overall art form that we're discussing here today, it's worth it in the end because it showcases yourself with all the accomplishments and the accolades that you've achieved.
yeah, definitely, and it makes you strong. And I always say to people, they always say to me, what's one word of advice that you can give to an upcomer? And I always say, train up. You have to train up. Train with people who are better than you. If you're training with people that you're finding it easy and you can get it over them, then you're training with the wrong people. For me personally, I need to suffer in training. I need to get beaten in training. I need to fight while I'm training, because that way I know when I get into that ring, I've done everything. I've taken no shortcuts.
And I think that's another reason why I respect you, because there's no shortcuts with you. I think to best describe you, and I think you can agree with me. Well, first and foremost, before we even discuss that name, talk about you're the machine. You're goddamn, you're like a cyborg. My goodness, you keep going and going and going. I got that's another name I'll add to you, like a cyborg in a way, but that's a good thing. But I also look at it like you're also on your straight and narrow path, and that is the best way to be, because you're fully focused, and that really showcases not just your overall as a fighter, Miss Sindy Maricic, but your overall being. It's your mind, body, and soul.
Absolutely, and I always made sure that I trained. I never really had what they call, you have a training camp, but if you're a fighter, it's 24/7. There's no off time. There's a period of time where, say, 6 weeks prior, you've got a fight coming up, and just that a few things will change during that time, whether that's your diet, you need to cut weight, or you do a period of, say, three weeks of quite high intensity, then taper off. But I pride myself on always being ready, because especially back in my day, I didn't have the opportunity to go, oh, I've got another fight coming up in 6 weeks' time. I could get a phone call the following week, which has happened to me before. I've got a fight in Sweden. Do you want to take it? I took it on, less than two weeks notice, and flew all the way out to Sweden. So I had to be fight fit. I had to be on weight. So I always had to be ready, and I always made sure that I could fight every round at high intensity. I never thought, well, I'm only fighting 5 rounds. I only need to win 3. No, I need to win every round. That's just the way I saw it. So I trained like that. So that's how I got my name, the machine, in the gym, because of my intensity, my work ethic. One of the guys said at one point, where I had a bit of a nosebleed, and he said to me, he goes, now I know you're human, that you're actually bleeding blood and not oil. Those were his words.
Well, to add on to that, I also think what's interesting, because it really applies to all sports, because everything can happen at the drop of a dime. Like you're talking about, hey, just a couple weeks or a few short days, hey, you want to take this fight. It's not just an opportunity thing, but it's just like you always have to be ready. It's the same thing that goes for any sport, because you never know who may get injured, you never know who may need to be substituted in. It's like, hey, man, you got to be always ready. It's kind of like you got to be quick. You got to be quick with it.
That's exactly right. And when you make a decision to be a fighter, it's not a part-time job. It's full-time. So for me, it's all or nothing.
And I also look at it from your stance, because you were talking about your work ethic, and I'd like to add on to that, if I will. Like me as a kid, and here's what we were talking about, how women have come so far in sports and combative nature, right? Like when I was a kid going into the local convenience store, I remember looking at Flex magazine, all these bodybuilding magazines, right? Now, the typical bodybuilding magazine cover is like, you see the muscular guys and you see them posing and stuff. But women also in the bodybuilding aspect, I love, because there's so many girls that are very disciplined in fitness and the discipline that they have. And this goes into sports as well. Because when I look at you, and I mean this with the utmost sincerity and respect towards yourself, Miss Maricic, great fitness, you have a great look, great stature, you look lovely. It really shows within your overall work that you've done in your tone.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, that's just a byproduct of just training.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't really, you train because you want to be a better athlete, you want to be a better fighter, and it just, you reap the rewards of, you can look good at the same time. And that's what I do love about. I say this to a lot of women. If you take up Muay Thai, your body will change without you having to even work for it, like focus on it. The changes will happen. You will get strong, you will get fit, you will lose the weight, and you will have functional muscle.
Agreed. And it's kind of like I'll use a sentiment here in an old adage I remember as a kid. There was a song called Until We Rich. It was by hip hop artists Ice Cube and Crazy Bone, right? One of the lyrics in that song is, you got your mind right, get your grind right, got to keep going. I think that's how a lot of people have to live with that adage, because you got to get your mind right, get yourself right from the mind standpoint, and the grind right. Keep staying on your workflow, and you will see results. So there's a lot of, there's a lot that goes into that, those sentiments.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's you over here, Miss Sindy Maricic, which I got to say, first and foremost, a couple final things, and then I'm going to say this right now: the overture's here. Anytime you want to come back onto the show, I'd love to have you. I really enjoyed this conversation and shooting the breeze with you today.
I loved it as well, and I love to come back if you want to have another chat anytime.
Oh, of course. First and foremost, man. I mean, I've seen your work machine. Why would I not want to have you come back, man? I've seen your kicks, I've seen your strikes. I'd like to be, not on the other end of those, but I digress. But absolutely, we'll have another chat, my friend. But a couple final
Thank
things.
you so much.
Oh, you're
Yep.
very welcome. A couple final things I got to say to you. First and foremost, what's interesting about the world that we're in today is because, my goodness, 2020, man, we've dealt with COVID, we've dealt with a pandemic, we've dealt with quarantining. I got to say, even through the tough times that we've gone through this year, the positive fact about it is we get to do a lot of uniqueness from our homes. We get to do home gyms and stuff. So even through the bad times, we got to, equate it with some good times. And working out and doing a lot of creativity stuff around the home does help for a lot of people during these trying times.
Oh, absolutely. And I think also too, when you have something taken away from you, when it gets given back, you have a greater appreciation for what you had. And I think that has, it's that's going to go a long way with people. Some people haven't been able to get back to the gym for 6 months plus. To have that, that the training and that environment, and also understanding and having appreciation for the bonds that they actually formed with their fellow training partners too. That, because that's actually really important. So to progress as a fighter or as a martial artist, those bonds are very, very important to how you develop.
Agreed. And I think that really goes with all athletes. And I think my last sentiment I'll say before I have you promote the social media, I think everybody has a purpose, like we discussed in the show, and everybody, whether it be creative times during quarantine, how you have to work out and do your mind, body, and soul. I think everybody out there has a purpose, and whether it be in fighting or what have you, I think every one of us have a difference to make, and each and every one of us have to be disciplined. And I think if you could have that same mindset like yourself and many people, everybody's going to go far. And I have to say thank you once more for paving the way for a lot of fighters like yourself.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Ah, you're very welcome. First and foremost, I'm going to have you promote the social media, because if you want to see the lovely Miss Sindy Maricic just doing some yoga, kicking butt, taking names, training, fighting, what
Yeah.
have you, you're a great follow. And I want to mention that first. You're a great follow. So please promote the Facebook, Twitter, the Instagram, where people can follow you on all forms of social media. The floor is yours, Sindy. Please go right ahead.
Thank you. So you can follow me on Twitter at Just Cinder, and also my athletes page on Facebook, which is just Sindy Maricic, and also my Instagram, which is Sindy Maricic at Knee Machine.
Knee Machine. That's all you need
Yes,
to know, people. Just type in Knee Machine and this lovely
Knee
person.
Machine, and it will come up.
Yes. I was about to say your lovely face will come up with the Knee Machine. There's a lot of great things and a lot of great attributes that you possess, and we're all grateful and we're all appreciative of what you do. So this is also where I step back. Miss Sindy Maricic, do you have any final words for your fans? Have been supporting you since day one. Do you have any final words for the people? Please go ahead on that front as well.
Yeah, I do. Their appreciation and their support, it goes a long way with me, and I am so grateful to have such beautiful people back me from the day dot, and also to the new people that have come on and who have drawn inspiration from what I do. Thank you so much. That's all I can really say. It really means a lot to me.
Well, let me tell you something, Miss Sindy Maricic. You're grateful, and we are grateful for you. I love you. I respect you. And the last thing I'll say is beauty, strength, and dominance, 3 key elements that make women the work of art that they are. And you, my friend, are a work of art, and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for the chat today.
Oh, you're very welcome. So for Sindy Maricic, my name is Mike Larkin. This concludes another edition of On the Mic with Mike, and we will talk to you in the next episode. Thank you for listening.